A port of memory. The Valiant cut through the mist, its hull slicing cleanly through the darkened waters as it approached the dock. The air carried the scent of salt and damp wood, mingling with the distant aroma of fresh bread and pipe smoke drifting from the town beyond. The lanterns lining the wharf burned low, flickering in the light breeze that sent the moored ships rocking gently in their berths. Blackwood stood at the helm, his hands resting on the worn wood of the wheel. The wind caught his coat as he looked out at the shoreline, the dim glow of the town stretching along the waterfront, its uneven rooftops silhouetted against the cloudy sky. It was a place neither bustling nor abandoned, just the right kind of port for a ship to slip in unnoticed and handle its business before the tide called it back to sea. A voice from below cut through the hush of the moment. "Captain, dock hands are waiting." Blackwood cast a glance at the crew, all moving with the efficiency of men who had done this 100 times before. He nodded. "Lower the gangplank. We won't be long here." Stepping down onto the dock, his boots met the aged planks with a familiar creak. The air was thick with the remnants of a recent rain, puddles forming in the uneven wood. A few figures moved along the harbour, fishermen unloading their late catches, a watchman making his rounds, a pair of cloaked men speaking in hushed tones near the entrance of a dimly lit tavern. Blackwood paid them no mind as he strode forward, his steps purposeful. It was the kind of place that never truly grew, only endured. Shops with warped wooden signs hanging above their doors, streets of packed dirt turned to thick mud from the evening showers, and the occasional candle-lit window where a lone figure sat, watching the world outside with quiet interest. Blackwood turned down a narrow alley, the scent of damp stone rising as the buildings closed in around him. At the end of the street, a modest structure sat nestled between two larger buildings, its wooden shingles dark with age, the sign above the door swaying gently in the wind. The portmaster's office. He reached for the door handle, pausing for just a moment as a strange sensation settled over him, like a thought, half-formed, a memory stirring just out of reach. Then, shaking it off, he stepped inside. Reality sinks in. Blackwood's eyes snapped open, his breath slow but steady, as the dim ceiling above him came into focus. He blinked a few times, shaking off the last traces of the dream. Or was it a memory? The sensation lingered in his bones, a strange weight that didn't feel like the usual haze of sleep. He lay there for a moment, the image of the portmaster's office still vivid in his mind, the scent of rain and salt air clinging stubbornly to his thoughts. With a grunt, he pushed himself upright, running a hand over his face. A dream, nothing more. He had plenty of those. Visions of the Valiant, old ports, places he had once been or imagined himself visiting. But something about this one gnawed at him, something beyond the usual longing for a time that no longer existed. He shook his head. No sense in dwelling. The morning light was already creeping through the thin curtains, casting a dull glow over Finn's apartment. The city beyond hummed with life, distant car horns and the muffled chatter of pedestrians signaling the world had started its usual march forward. Swinging his legs over the side of the couch, their makeshift bed for the past month, he stretched, bones popping in protest. Sullivan was still snoring somewhere. Garrick had somehow sprawled himself across an armchair, and Finn's ever-bouncing robotic vacuum had wedged itself under the coffee table again, blinking helplessly. His nose caught the scent of coffee, strong, earthy, a true gift of the modern age. He stood, padding quietly toward the kitchen, where he found Finn already leaning against the counter, one hand wrapped around a mug, the other flipping lazily through a book that looked far too thick for leisure reading. "Morning," Finn greeted without looking up. Blackwood grunted in reply, making a beeline for the coffee pot. Just as he reached for a mug, a sharp clank and a muffled curse sounded from behind him. "Bloody devil's contraption!" Blackwood turned to see Red, half dressed for work, wrestling with the toaster. or, more accurately, glaring at it like it had personally insulted his lineage. "What's the trouble, Red?" Blackwood asked, sipping his coffee. Red yanked his toast free, glaring at the slightly charred edges. "Finn swears these boxes don't burn bread, yet every morning it happens all the same." He sniffed the offending toast, shaking his head. "It's like a man asking for a rare cut of beef and getting a shoe instead." Finn, still reading, smirked. "That's user error, my friend." "User error?" Red turned to Blackwood, waving the toast. "I watched the merchant at the market sell us this thing. It's a metal box with fire inside it, aye?" "Aye," Blackwood confirmed, amused. Red pointed accusingly at Finn. "Then explain how I am the problem, and not the metal firebox." Finn shrugged. "Maybe it just doesn't like you." Blackwood chuckled, shaking his head as he turned back to his coffee. Red muttered something about accursed sorcery before taking a bite of the toast anyway, grimacing the entire time. After a moment of companionable silence, Finn closed his book and set it aside. "So I was thinking," he began, leaning back against the counter. "It's been a month now, yeah?" Blackwood raised a brow. "Aye." Finn motioned vaguely around the apartment. "And I love you guys, but maybe it's time you started looking for a place of your own." Red paused, mid-chew. "Like our own ship?" Finn sighed. "More like an apartment. A house. Something where I don't wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone sharpening a cutlass on my coffee table." Blackwood scratched his chin. "That was Sullivan, wasn't it?" Red nodded. "Said he liked the grain of the wood." Finn pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right. And as enriching as this cultural exchange has been, you guys have jobs now. You're adjusting. You don't need to live like, pirates on the run." Red considered that, then looked at Blackwood. "Can we still live like pirates? Because I'll not be sleeping in a bed so big, I can't feel the walls." Blackwood smirked. "That can be arranged." He turned to Finn. "You have something in mind?" Finn gestured vaguely. "I can help you look, but you guys need to start figuring it out. You're becoming part of this world, whether you plan to or not." Blackwood took a slow sip of his coffee, rolling the thought over in his mind. A home, a place to anchor themselves in this strange land. The thought wasn't unappealing, but it still felt foreign. Rooting themselves here. Wouldn't that be admitting he stopped the thought before it finished? Red checked the clock and groaned. "I have to be off. The mall demands my presence." He slung his satchel over his shoulder and grabbed the rest of his sad toast. As he headed for the door, Finn called after him, "Try not to tackle anyone over an old lady stealing coupons this time." Red scowled. "That happened once." The door shut behind him. Finn turned back to Blackwood, watching him thoughtfully. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Blackwood exhaled through his nose. "Aye." Finn grinned. "Good." The toaster dinged again, and Blackwood instinctively reached for the fresh toast. The moment he did, the device shot the bread out with the force of a cannon, sending it flying across the kitchen. Finn barely ducked. Blackwood eyed the fallen toast. Red, from beyond the door, called back, "User error, was it? Red's reckoning." Red strode into the security office, ready to begin his watch, only to be immediately met with an airborne donut. "Heads up!" Red reacted on instinct, snatching the pastry from the air with the reflexes of a seasoned warrior. He turned it over in his hand, scowling. "Who throws foodstuffs in a place of work?" Frank DeLuca, sitting at his desk with the expression of a man who had long since given up questioning his life choices, gestured to another guard, Marty, who was cackling beside the break-room table. "New guy didn't believe me when I said you'd catch it." Frank took a long sip of coffee. "Told him you've got pirate reflexes." Marty grinned. "Yeah, but will he eat it?" Red studied the donut a moment longer before taking a solemn bite. "Victory be sweet this day." Frank exhaled. "Okay, moving on. Morning brief. Sunglasses kiosk guy says someone's been using his display mirrors to blind customers. The smoothie stand had some kind of incident involving an unsupervised child and a blender. Don't ask, just check it out. And..." He pinched the bridge of his nose. We have a goose situation. Red's grip tightened around his half-eaten donut. The beast returns. Frank waved a hand. Just let animal control handle it this time. Red set his jaw. No promises. First stop, the sunglasses kiosk. The attendant, a lanky man with an air of unwarranted authority, gestured wildly as Red approached. It's happening again, he hissed. Some punk is using my high-end display mirrors to blind people. Do you know how many potential sales I've lost? Red stroked his chin. A devious tactic, the sun itself, turned against man. The attendant blinked. Yeah, exactly. Red scanned the food court. A teenage boy, clutching a suspiciously angled handheld mirror, cackled as a distant mall walker recoiled from a well-placed sunbeam. Red's hand went to his radio. Frank, I be dealing with a tactical light assault. Frank's voice crackled back. What? Never mind. Red strode toward the culprit. The boy, seeing him approach, let out a panicked yelp and bolted. The chase was brief, but dramatic. The boy darted behind the pretzel stand. Red vaulted over a bench. Finally, the teen tripped over an abandoned mop bucket and landed in a display of inflatable pool toys. Red loomed over him. Ye fought bravely, but the law prevails. The kid groaned. Dude, I just wanted to make my friends laugh. Red nodded approvingly. A noble cause, but misplaced. Next, the smoothie stand. The employee behind the counter looked shaken. Her eyes darted between the blender and a balloon floating near the ceiling like she had seen something unspeakable. What happened here? Red asked. She swallowed. A kid, a balloon, static electricity, and the blender switch. Red followed her gaze to the smoothie-covered ceiling. He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Ye have seen battle this day, but ye live to fight another. She sniffled. Thanks. Then, finally, it happened. A low, guttural honk echoed through the mall. Red's hand flew to his radio. Frank. A sigh. What now? The beast be near. Silence. Then, just leave it. Alone. Red turned slowly. The goose stood in the corridor, unbothered by human law. It locked eyes with him. A battle of wills. Red took a slow step forward. The goose flapped its wings. Red adjusted his belt. The goose honked, long and defiant. Then chaos. The bird launched itself forward. Red dodged left, knocking over a mall directory. The goose pivoted, beak snapping. A kiosk attendant screamed and fled. Shoppers scattered. Then Red spotted it. A supply closet. Door slightly ajar. He pivoted, leading the charge. The goose followed, wings spread wide. At the last moment, Red sidestepped, grabbed a mop, and swung the door open. The goose, too caught up in its battle lust, overshot and careened into the closet. With swift precision, Red slammed the door shut. Silence. A single furious honk from within as he barred the door shut with the mop's handle. Red pressed the radio. Frank, the beast be contained. Frank groaned. Animal control is on their way. Please tell me that nothing is broken. As the animal control officer loaded the goose into their van, they turned to Red. You know, most people just ignore these things. Red crossed his arms. Most people lack the will to act. The officer chuckled and shut the van door. Frank clapped a hand on Red's shoulder. One day, that thing's gonna outsmart you. Red gazed into the distance. Not today, Frank. Frank sighed. Just get back to work. Red turned on his heel, boots clunking with righteous duty. And somewhere in the distance, a defiant honk echoed in the wind. A history-long thought, sunken. The museum was unusually quiet between tours, the midday lull stretching long enough for Blackwood to breathe. He welcomed the stillness, relishing the chance to wander the exhibits without a throng of tourists trailing behind him, pointing at relics they barely understood. He adjusted his coat. Still not entirely used to wearing the buttoned-up look required of a museum docent, and drifted past familiar displays. Ship models, aged compasses, rusted cutlasses that had long lost their edge. He let his fingers trail over the cool glass of a case holding a well-preserved spyglass, one eerily similar to the one he had once carried on the Valiant. It was a strange feeling, walking among the ghosts of his own time. But it wasn't until he rounded a corner and spotted a newly unveiled exhibit that the unease truly set in. A large glass-enclosed case stood before him, carefully lit to highlight the centerpiece, an aged leather-bound book, its title embossed in worn gold lettering, How Pirates Met Their End, The Forgotten Tragedy of the Valiant. Blackwood stared. A prickle ran down his spine. Slowly, he stepped closer, eyes scanning the description on the plaque below. The Valiant, captained by the infamous Jonathan Blackwood, met its tragic fate in the spring of 1702, when a violent storm overtook the vessel. Historians agree that all hands were lost to the sea, leaving no survivors to tell the tale. This book compiles first-hand accounts of those who pursued Blackwood, as well as the recorded maritime logs detailing the ship's last known location. His fingers clenched at his sides. Dead, all hands lost. It was history written in ink, his crew, his ship, their lives, all reduced to a neatly recorded demise. He swallowed, pulse steady but heavy, as if the weight of the past had wrapped itself around his ribs. But we are not dead. The thought was stubborn, defiant. He and his crew still breathed, still walked, still shaped the world around them. And yet to history, they were nothing more than bones beneath the waves. A quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. I had a feeling you might find that one interesting. Blackwood turned, his expression already schooled into careful neutrality as he faced Arthur Pemberley, the museum's curator. Pemberley was an older man, thin but sharp-eyed, dressed in a crisp, dark vest and tie. He held himself with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his life surrounded by history and knew its weight well. His hands were folded behind his back, his gaze lingering on the book before flicking up to Blackwood with a knowing glint. Quite the story, isn't it? Pemberley mused. A full ship gone just like that, swallowed by time. Blackwood kept his voice even. Aye, a tragedy. Pemberley hummed, nodding. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, a rather convenient one. No remains, no wreckage, just whispers in the dark, until history cemented the tale. He glanced sideways at Blackwood. Of course, history has been known to misplace the truth now and again. Blackwood met his gaze, unreadable. That's so. Pemberley's smile was faint. But there. Oh, certainly. Sometimes the truth walks right past you when you least expect it. A beat of silence stretched between them, heavy with something unspoken. Then, just as easily, Pemberley exhaled, shifting back to his usual composed demeanor. Well, I won't keep you from your break, Mr. Blackwood. Just thought you might appreciate the new edition. Blackwood inclined his head. Aye, that I do. Pemberley lingered a second longer, then gave a polite nod and strolled away, hands still clasped behind his back. Blackwood exhaled slowly, turning back to the exhibit. The book sat there, its pages locked behind glass, a version of his past set in stone. Sullivan Garrick's Misadventure. It was a rare and sacred thing when both Sullivan and Garrick found themselves with a full day unburdened by work. No polishing glasses, no bellowing into cameras, no dealing with peculiar modern folk asking foolish questions. A man needed a day to roam, to see what the world had to offer, and to do so in the company of a friend made it all the finer. Or at least, that had been the plan. Instead, Sullivan now found himself staring in mild horror at Garrick, who was currently locked in a heated, one-sided argument with a street magician in the middle of a crowded sidewalk. I tell you, sir, this is deception most foul, Garrick barked, pointing an accusatory finger at the magician's deck of cards. That queen did not vanish. You palmed it. The magician, a thin man with slicked back hair and a smug expression, smirked. It's called sleight of hand, my guy. That's the trick. A trick, aye? Then I shall best you at your own game. Sullivan, quick, a deck of cards. Sullivan sighed, rubbing his temples. Do I look like a man who carries a deck of cards at all times? Yes. Fair point. Their bickering was interrupted by a passerby dropping $1 into Garrick's coat pocket, mistaking the whole debacle for an improvised street performance. Garrick scowled, yanking the bill out and waving it at the magician. You see, now I am owed a cut of the earnings. Sullivan quickly grabbed him by the sleeve and pulled him away before the situation escalated into a full-blown duel. Stop 1. The arcade. Their next stop was an arcade packed with noisy machines and flashing lights, modern sorcery as far as Garrick was concerned. Sullivan had convinced him to enter under the promise that they could test their skills, which apparently meant throwing money into machines that ate it with no guarantee of reward. Sullivan at least took to it with ease, managing to win a sizable pile of tickets. Garrick, however, had declared war on the claw machine after it refused to surrender a stuffed octopus he had set his sights on. It cheats, Garrick roared, shaking the machine violently as children watched in awe. I had it in my grasp. A teenage arcade employee shuffled over, clearly debating whether he was being paid enough to deal with this. Sir, you can't... Sullivan stepped in, dropping an arm over Garrick's shoulders and steering him away. Apologies, lad. He lost a battle, but his heart remains strong. They exited with nothing but a handful of cheap prizes Sullivan had traded his tickets for, one of which was a plastic pirate eye patch that he immediately forced Garrick to wear. I look ridiculous, Garrick muttered, adjusting the strap. No, you look distinguished, Sullivan lied. Stop 2. The cafe with a talking bird. A small cafe caught their eye next, not because of its coffee, but because of the massive parrot perched outside on a wooden stand, preening its feathers. A sign nearby read, Ask Charlie a question. Sullivan, ever the conversationalist, leaned in. All right, Charlie, what's the meaning of life? The parrot cocked its head, and in a gratingly cheerful voice squawked, Pay your taxes. Both men recoiled. What devilry is this? Garrick demanded, pointing at the bird. A woman passing by snorted. That bird's got more sense than most people in this city. Sullivan grinned. All right, Charlie, tell us something useful. What's the best place for a drink in town? Charlie fluffed his feathers. Ask your mother. Garrick gasped. Insolence! Sullivan doubled over laughing as an elderly man sitting nearby snickered, tipping his coffee cup toward them. Charlie's got no filter, boys. Don't take it personal. They left before Garrick could challenge the bird to a duel, but Sullivan made sure to tip the cafe owner for the entertainment. Stop 3. The hat shop incident. After wandering for a time, they stumbled upon a shop dedicated entirely to hats. Garrick, ever the enthusiast of fine headwear, dragged Sullivan inside, proclaiming that a man's hat was his second soul. I need something bold, Garrick mused, rifling through an assortment of fedoras. Something commanding. You need something that fits your massive head, Sullivan countered. The shopkeeper, an older woman with sharp eyes, peered at Garrick before plucking a tricorn from the display and plopping it onto his head. A man like you doesn't need a new hat, she said simply. He needs his hat. Garrick blinked, running his fingers over the brim. Sullivan raised a brow. Feeling nostalgic? Perhaps? Then the price tag caught his eye. $75. The moment was gone. They left the shop empty-handed, but with their dignity mostly intact. Stop 4. The park and a mysterious fortune. As the sun began to dip, they found themselves at a park, where a street vendor was selling roasted nuts and a small table was set up for tarot readings. A woman with long, dark hair and an air of mystery waved them over. You seek answers, she said, eyes gleaming. Sit. Sullivan nudged Garrick. You game? Garrick shrugged. If she tells me I'm cursed, I already know. They sat as she shuffled a deck of cards and laid 3 before them. She turned the first. "The past," she murmured. "A great storm, a lost path." Garrick and Sullivan exchanged glances. The second card flipped. "The present, a great journey, though you walk among the unfamiliar." Sullivan tapped the table. "All right, that's eerie." The third card was drawn. "The future." The woman frowned. "Ha!" Sullivan blinked. "Ha!" She turned the card toward them. It was blank. Garrick smirked. "That doesn't bode well." She chuckled. "It means your future is unwritten. You carve your own fate." Sullivan leaned back, exhaling. "Well, that's a relief. I thought she was going to say we get hit by a bus." "Not today," she mused. "But be wary. Time has its own way of catching up." A thoughtful silence passed between them before Sullivan finally clapped his hands together. "All right, well, drinks?" Garrick stood, stretching. "Aye, and if any birds are present, I swear on my honor I shall not engage." "Progress," Sullivan said, grinning. Sullivan and Garrick, having successfully avoided magical birds and overpriced hats, continued their aimless voyage through the city. Every street offered some new absurdity, and both men were eager to meet it head-on. The grocery store gambit. At some point, hunger struck. They found themselves inside a massive grocery store, Sullivan insisting it was called a market, while Garrick argued it was a warehouse of edible riches. Sullivan grabbed a shopping basket and immediately began filling it with snacks he had developed an addiction to over the past month. Pretzels, peanut butter cups, and a particular brand of potato chips he claimed had divine properties. Garrick, on the other hand, was completely fascinated by the self-checkout machines. "You're telling me this box is the shopkeep?" "Aye," Sullivan sighed. "Modern wonders." Garrick hesitantly scanned a loaf of bread, nearly dropping it when the machine beeped. "Thievery!" "No, you have to. Oh, for the love of... just put it in the bagging area." The machine responded. "Unexpected item in the bagging area." Garrick recoiled. "It speaks." A long line began forming behind them. A teenager in a work vest sauntered over, unimpressed. "Do you guys, need help?" Sullivan gave an apologetic smile, while Garrick, still glaring at the machine, muttered, "If this thing tries to charge me twice, I'm running it through with my blade." By the time they left, they had somehow paid for twice as many items as they'd originally grabbed, but Garrick was convinced he'd won the battle against the talking metal shopkeep. The gym incident. Further down the street, they stumbled upon a gym. Inside, men and women lifted heavy iron bars, ran endlessly on mechanical treadmills, and, most shockingly, boxed the air itself. "What in Poseidon's name?" Garrick muttered, watching a man shadowbox. Sullivan grinned. "You want to try?" Thus began a 30-minute ordeal where Garrick, entirely misunderstanding the purpose of weightlifting, attempted to outlift the strongest man in the gym. The strong man, a towering figure with arms like tree trunks, grinned at the challenge. Sullivan stood back, arms crossed. "This is going to end terribly." Garrick grabbed a barbell and heaved, only to find himself completely immobile. The strong man chuckled and effortlessly lifted twice the weight. Garrick, feeling personally insulted, declared, "Lifting is for fools. A warrior's strength lies in his sword arm," before dramatically storming out. Sullivan followed, throwing an apologetic thumbs up to the gym staff. The old man and the chess game. At a small park, they encountered an elderly man sitting at a chess table, setting up his pieces with an air of deep contemplation. He glanced up at them. "You two look like men of strategy." Garrick immediately sat down. "I accept your challenge, old one." Sullivan sighed and found a bench to sit on. 5 minutes later, Garrick had lost. "Again," he demanded. "Another 5 minutes. Another loss. You are a sorcerer." The old man chuckled. "No, lad. You just don't think more than one move ahead." Sullivan smirked. "He's got you there." Garrick scowled but shook the man's hand. "A worthy foe." The old man simply patted his shoulder. Enjoy the city, boys, but be careful. It's easy to make a mistake when you don't look ahead. Neither of them noticed how ominous that sounded. Episode 3, Act 3, The Great and Tragic Arrest of Sullivan the Bard. As night fell, they found themselves wandering past a large fountain, where a group of street musicians had gathered, playing lively tunes. Sullivan, having had a few drinks from a nearby vendor, decided to bless them with his own voice. Standing atop the fountain's edge, he bellowed out an old sea shanty, much to the delight of onlookers. Coins and bills were tossed into the open case, and the musicians, impressed by his booming voice, encouraged him. Then the police arrived. Apparently, singing on top of a city landmark was not encouraged. Sullivan, caught mid-verse, turned to see two officers approaching, one of them already reaching for a notepad. "Sir, you can't be standing on that." Sullivan, in his slightly inebriated state, blinked. "I can't? No. But I am. That's not the point." Garrick, watching from the crowd, whispered, "I don't think he's talking his way out of this one." The officer sighed. "Sir, do you have a permit to be performing here?" "A permit?" Sullivan glanced at the musicians. "Do they have a permit?" One of them helpfully pointed to a piece of paper clipped to their case. "Ah," Sullivan exhaled. "You're coming with us." The next thing he knew, he was being guided toward a police car, while Garrick, still holding the grocery bags from earlier, watched in mild amusement. "Well, this is unfortunate." Sullivan, hands now cuffed, shot him a look. "Do something." Garrick thought for a moment. Then, with all the sincerity in the world, he said, "I shall alert Finn," then turned on his heel and walked away. Sullivan groaned. "Oh, splendid. That's exactly what I wanted." As the car pulled away, he had only one thought. He really should have seen this coming. The great jailbreak, sort of. Finn sat on the couch, one leg draped over the armrest, half watching a local news report while absently flipping a coin between his fingers. A reporter was droning on about something unimportant, an interview with a city council member, or maybe a segment on rising rent prices. Finn wasn't really listening. A bag of chips sat open beside him, but he wasn't eating those either. He had spent the last hour decompressing from the whirlwind of the past few days, letting his mind settle into the mindless haze that only bad television could provide. Then, with all the force of a cannon blast, the apartment door slammed open. Finn barely flinched as Garrick stormed in, looking equal parts exasperated and entertained, which was never a good combination. "Finn!" Garrick bellowed, chest heaving like he'd just sprinted across the city. Finn, still watching the TV, tossed the coin into the air and caught it. "Let me guess. You set something on fire, and I need to lie to the authorities again." "No," Garrick scoffed. "I would never—" He paused, reconsidering. "Not this time." Finn finally turned his head. "All right. What happened?" Garrick strode across the room, plopped down onto the couch, and dramatically flung an arm over his face. "Sullivan has been taken." "By who?" "The city guards." Finn blinked. Do you mean the police?" "Aye." Garrick sat up, pointing a finger. "And was a most unjust imprisonment. He was merely sharing the joy of song, and they shackled him like a common brigand." Finn groaned and rubbed his temples. "Okay. 1. Stop talking like that. You sound like a rejected Shakespeare audition. 2. What exactly did he do?" Garrick cleared his throat. "He was enthusiastically performing upon an elevated surface of municipal importance." Finn squinted. "Did he climb something?" Garrick nodded solemnly. "Was it a statue? A fountain?" Finn let out a slow breath. "And how drunk was he?" "I'd say about half a cask deep." "Unbelievable." Finn grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair. "All right, let's go bail him out before he starts reciting poetry to his cellmates." They made their way to the police station on foot, Finn keeping a brisk pace while Garrick insisted on recounting every single detail of the incident. "And then they shackled him." "Yes, you mentioned that." "I was appalled, Finn." You said that too. Garrick crossed his arms. Are you not outraged? Finn sighed. Oh, I'm thrilled. Can't wait to spend my evening sweet-talking some overworked desk sergeant into releasing our idiot bard. As they walked, they passed a hot dog stand. Coincidentally, the hot dog stand. The vendor, an older Cuban man named Miguel, recognized them immediately. Ah, my favorite pirates. Finn, already rubbing his forehead in stress, just waved. Hey, Miguel. Miguel grinned. You look like you need another hot dog. I look like I need a vacation. Garrick, meanwhile, had stopped to seriously consider the menu. Tell me, good sir, what is a Chicago-style dog? Miguel gestured grandly. It is a masterpiece, a work of culinary art, a symphony of flavors. He puts pickles on it. Finn cut in. Garrick recoiled. You desecrate it with pickles? Miguel frowned. Desecrate? My friend, this is the peak of hot dog innovation. Finn grabbed Garrick by the coat. We do not have time for this. Garrick huffed, but allowed himself to be dragged along. I shall return for that debate, Miguel. I'll be waiting. As they got closer to the station, Finn pulled out his phone and started running through mental calculations. Okay, so assuming it's just a public disturbance charge, we should be able to post bail for... Garrick held up a hand. Bail. Yes, bail. That thing that lets you not stay in jail? Garrick frowned. We have to pay to get him back. Finn gave him a look. Yes, because that's how laws work. Garrick scoffed. What a scam. In my time, if a man was imprisoned, he either escaped or suffered his fate. Well, this is not your time, and Sullivan is not about to stage a prison break. Probably. Hopefully not. Finn shot him a sharp look. Garrick cleared his throat. Ahem, yes, well, I suppose we should hurry. As they approached the looming station doors, Finn sighed, already mentally preparing himself for whatever chaos awaited inside. All right, he muttered. Let's go get our wacky bard. A day in the life of Red. Red had developed a certain rhythm to his days at the mall. It wasn't like being on a ship, where the tides dictated time and storms could turn a moment's peace into a fight for survival. But there was a structure to it, and he found some comfort in that. His morning started with a lap around the place, ensuring all was in order. This mostly involved nodding at the custodians, making sure no one was trying to scale the indoor rock-climbing wall without paying, and keeping an eye on the guy who always loitered near the massage chairs, but never actually used them. The afternoon, however, was where things got interesting. It started, as most disturbances did, with shouting. Red turned the corner near Electrozone, the mall's main electronics store, and immediately spotted trouble. A short, furious man in an ill-fitting tank top was berating a terrified employee at the checkout counter. I know what I saw. I scanned it, and it said $30. Now you're telling me it's $60. The employee, a lanky teenager with acne and a name tag that read Tyler, looked like he wanted to disappear. Sir, I don't know what to tell you. That was probably a... Red stepped forward. What would be the problem here? Tank top man whirled around, sizing Red up. Who the hell are you? Red folded his arms. Mall security. The man scoffed. Yeah? Well, you got any authority over scam artists? He gestured wildly at the store. Because this scammer is trying to charge me $60 for a... Red tilted his head. What were you buying? The man hesitated. A wireless speaker. Tyler, still looking nervous, cleared his throat. Sir, the smaller one next to the speaker you scanned was $30. The one you picked up was the bigger model. Red nodded. Seems straightforward to me. Tank top man's face turned red. I saw what I saw. I want the big one. Red's expression didn't change. Then pay $60. The man looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Red's unyielding stare stopped him. After a long pause, he let out a frustrated noise, grabbed the cheaper speaker, and stomped to the register. As he paid and left, Tyler let out a shaky breath. Dude, thanks. Red just shrugged. People yell a lot. If you don't yell back, they run out of steam. Tyler grinned. You should, write a book. Red shook his head. I'll stick to stopping crime. With that handled, Red continued his patrol. The next major incident was less of a security issue and more of a mystery. It happened at Twister Pretzel, a small stand near the food court. Red had stopped by to do his usual check-in when the cashier, an older woman named Linda, waved him over. Red, you're a smart guy. Maybe you can explain this. She pointed at the counter where a single half-eaten pretzel sat on a napkin. Red blinked. All right. Linda folded her arms. I put that there 2 minutes ago. It wasn't there before. Nobody bought it. Nobody asked for it. It just appeared. Red frowned. A pretzel. Materialized. Like magic, Linda said. Red crouched, inspecting the scene as if it were a crime scene. The pretzel was missing a clean bite. Someone had started eating it, then abandoned it. He glanced around, then noticed something. A trail of faint crumbs led away from the counter, curving around a nearby bench. Following the trail, Red rounded the corner and found his culprit. A small, curly-haired toddler in a stroller, looking guilty as sin while clutching an empty napkin. Red turned back to Linda. The kid took it, realized it wasn't his, panicked and ditched it. Linda exhaled. Well, I guess that makes more sense than ghost pretzels. Red nodded. Mystery solved. Linda grinned. You know, you're good at this. Ever consider detective work? Red just smirked. One job at a time. By the time his shift ended, Red had de-escalated 3 arguments, helped an elderly woman find her car, stopped a group of teenagers from climbing the escalator the wrong way, removed a guy who thought the massage chairs were a free hotel. All in all, a pretty standard day. As he clocked out, he stretched his arms and let out a breath. The bailing out of Sullivan the Bard. Sullivan had spent the last hour in a holding cell, contemplating his life choices. More specifically, he was contemplating why the modern world had such a strong opposition to spontaneous public performances from atop public fountains. In his day, a man could climb any structure he pleased and belt out a tune without some uniformed enforcer taking issue. Yet, here he was. The other occupants of the cell were an odd bunch. A man who smelled strongly of garlic and kept mumbling about government. A woman who had been arrested for throwing an entire rotisserie chicken at someone, and a college student who had, in his own words, simply made the wrong decision at the right time. Before Sullivan could contemplate modern customs further, the door to the station swung open, and in came the rescue party. Finn strode in first, dressed like he owned the place. Garrick followed closely behind, looking only slightly guilty for abandoning Sullivan to his fate. The officer at the desk sighed. Let me guess, you're here for the fountain singer. Finn gave a charming smile. Indeed we are. The officer barely looked up as he grabbed a clipboard. Public disturbance, trespassing, and excessive enthusiasm. He glanced at Sullivan through the bars. You serenade the mayor's wife or something? Sullivan scoffed. No, I was merely lending my voice to the evening air. The officer grunted. Well, that evening air came with a $50 fine and a trip to the station. Finn, already pulling out his wallet, sighed. Let's just get this over with. Garrick leaned on the counter. Can I pay in doubloons? The officer gave him a deadpan look. No? Garrick clicked his tongue. Shame. They're worth more than your paper money. As Finn finished the paperwork, Sullivan was finally released from his cell. He stretched dramatically, rubbing his wrists. Ah, freedom! How I miss thee. Finn handed him his personal belongings. How about you miss getting arrested next time? Garrick smirked. Told you I'd come back for you. You left me. Garrick shrugged. I went to get help. The garlic-scented man waved at Sullivan from the cell. Don't forget about us, Bard. Tell the world our story. Sullivan took a step back. I most certainly will not. With that, Finn guided them both out of the station, shaking his head. One day. One day without a major incident. Is that too much to ask? Sullivan smirked. Wouldn't that be dreadfully boring? Finn shot him a look, but didn't argue. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the city stretched out before them, bustling as the evening traffic picked up. Finn hailed a cab, muttering under his breath about pirates causing trouble, while Garrick happily recounted his day of discovery. And Sullivan? He simply grinned. After all, what was an adventure without a little trouble? The evening recount. Blackwood stepped into the apartment just as the sun had fully dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, artificial glow through the windows. He set his hat on the coat rack, a habit he'd picked up after Finn nearly had a fit about him, leaving it on the couch one too many times, and let out a sigh as he took in the scene before him. The entire crew was already gathered in the living room, sprawled across furniture in various states of exhaustion and contentment. Finn sat on the arm of the couch, sipping from a bottle of water while listening to Garrick, who was gesturing wildly as he recounted something. Sullivan, freshly liberated from his unfortunate detainment, was lounging with his boots up on the coffee table, much to Finn's visible annoyance. Red had taken the far corner, absent-mindedly flicking a coin between his fingers, and even he looked somewhat weary from the day. Blackwood took a moment before stepping in. I take it the day has been eventful? Sullivan immediately grinned. You could say that. Finn scoffed. Sullivan got arrested. Blackwood blinked. Already? Aye, I'm surprised it took this long, Red muttered. Sullivan placed a hand over his chest as if offended. It was an unjust incarceration. A man should be free to sing where he pleases. Finn pointed at him. Not in public fountains. Garrick leaned forward. That's exactly what I told him. Blackwood shook his head with a chuckle before making his way to the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water for himself. I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. And how about you, Red? Did you manage to avoid being jailed today? Red smirked. Barely. Had to deal with some very impatient customers at the mall. He leaned back. Nothing I couldn't handle. Finn turned his attention back to Blackwood. And you? Any new discoveries? Blackwood hesitated for a moment before deciding not to mention the museum exhibit just yet. He wasn't sure why, but something about seeing his own death recorded in history had left a strange feeling in his chest, one he wasn't ready to unpack in front of the others. Instead, he smirked. I explored more of the city, learned a few interesting things. Did you know there are entire shops dedicated to nothing but selling tiny collectible spoons? Garrick's eyes widened. What purpose do they serve? None that I could determine. Sullivan shook his head. This world is strange. Finn, clearly used to their bewilderment at modern oddities, just sighed. Welcome to capitalism. The room settled into a comfortable rhythm of small conversation as they each shared the highlights of their day. The stories ranged from Garrick's ill-fated chess match to Red nearly quitting on a particularly rude customer to Finn's endless exasperation with all of them. Eventually, as the hour grew late, the conversation began to dwindle. One by one, they each stretched, yawned, and muttered something about getting some rest. Sullivan was the first to retreat to his room, declaring he needed his bardic rest, lest his voice lose its magic. Garrick followed soon after, muttering something about training in the morning. Red gave a simple nod before heading off, and Finn lingered just long enough to make sure Blackwood wasn't lost in thought. Blackwood gave him a knowing look. I'm fine, lad. Finn studied him for a moment before nodding. All right, get some rest. As Finn disappeared down the hall, Blackwood took a moment to himself, standing alone in the dimly lit living room. His eyes flickered toward the window, where the city lights twinkled like stars in the distance. He let out a breath, his mind still circling the idea of what he'd seen in the museum. But that was a problem for another day.